Alright, what's up YouTube? It's Krod here. I'm back with another good video for you guys today. And look who I have here. I have Mr. Errol Spence Jr. for Fight Night Champion. The homie, soon to be undisputed. That's if he gets his Manny Pacquiao fight. I doubt it. I'm pretty sure Manny Pacquiao is going to fight Mikey Garcia. And hey, if it's Spence versus Garcia or Garcia versus Crawford, either way, I think that would be a lot more reasonable and a lot more good of a fight to witness. And actually, I would like to see Mikey Garcia get that belt because I think he would be a 5-time world champion or a 5-division world champion. I'm not too sure. I believe he started at 135, 140, and and 147. Actually, no, let me just take a look at his box rec. Hold on. Mikey Garcia, you're my homie. I love Mikey, but he needs to work on his footwork. For real, homie, for real. Alright. Yeah, Mikey, he won a belt at, let's see, very first belt. Where is it? Yeah, he won a belt at not that many. Yeah, he doesn't. Yeah, he never won it at. Oh, okay. Yeah, he won a belt at 126 against Salido, and then after that, he moved up to 130, won a belt there, and then got real good and won belt at 135. And after that, I believe he moved up to 147. And he also got a belt at 140. So yeah, he's won belts at 126, 130, 140. And yeah, this would be his 4th weight division. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, if I got it right. 126, 130, 135. Oh, okay. Yeah. So, yeah, if Mikey Garcia were to beat Manny Pacquiao, 126, 130, 135, 140. Yeah, he would be a 5-division world champion. Yeah, so that would be the reality if Mikey Garcia were to fight Manny Pacquiao for the WBA title, and Mikey Garcia ends up beating Pac-Man. That will be a huge victory for Mikey, and he will have accomplished his legacy for 5-division world champion for 147. But here's the issue of what I'm going to bring up here. And I know some people are going to be very, very angry at me, and that's okay because I'm just going to keep it real with y'all. Because I am an empiricist, and I'm here for truth. I'm not here for feelings. But I am going to make the case of why I believe this man, Errol Spence Jr., will not fight Terence Crawford. And here's why. I'm going to probably come up with 3 good points for this. And I will probably finalize it at that. So, number 1 would have to be Errol Spence does not need Crawford at all. He is the A-side at 147 for this fight. When it came to contract negotiations, Crawford wanted to be very, sly. And I would probably just say very disingenuous by trying to say he wants 60-40 his way against Spence when obviously Spence is the A-side of this fight, so he can set anything up however he likes it. But it's just like, why would you say that to, the bigger, more well-known opponent in which Errol Spence has fought tougher upper echelon opponents? And, I'm not trying to be disrespectful here, but Terence Crawford has not fought anyone at 147. I mean, yes, his only big victories had to been against Kell Brook, which was recent, and Sean, or no, I was just about to say Sean Porter. Like, you guys were about to probably hear me say that. But no, his second decent victory had to been maybe Amir Khan. But other than that, that's it. You know, Crawford doesn't really have that many good opponents. And he wants to even have the nerve to try to say Aegiscus Cavaliskis was a good opponent. But it's like, dude, you obviously just didn't come in with any IQ or ring IQ against Cavaliskis. And Crawford just wanted to make it into a dogfight, which was not smart, especially coming from his orthodox, stance. But once he switches to southpaw, he's like absolutely crazy good. But here's the issue. Has Crawford ever fought a top welterweight like Danny Garcia or Sean Porter, where he has to adjust to that style where those guys don't get knocked out, they don't really get hit that much, and they know how to adjust to that style? When Crawford likes to get in, be very, very aggressive, but then he uses his athleticism to get his way in order to land those big shots. I don't think Crawford is really going to do all that fancy schmancy trying to move around and trying to use his aggressiveness as the main factor of trying to be all, super, slick Rick against opponents that have a very, very deep defense and a style where it gets Crawford to think. And granted, Crawford, he knows how to solve a lot of problems with many different styles that he fights up against. So he knows how to fit that puzzle and to make him more dominant against you, where he doesn't need to think. All it really takes is at least like a round or two, and then boom, Crawford can easily win. But here's the issue. When Crawford fights a guy like Spence, or fights a guy like Porter, or fights a guy like, I don't know, maybe... I know that you guys will probably laugh at me at this, but, let's just say Keith Thurman. When you fight a guy with power and a guy that knows how to slow you down and knows how to make you feel uncomfortable, do you really think Crawford is going to have that advantage when all hell breaks loose, when he cannot land those big shots to make himself more dominant, in his fights? And I just don't think between him and Errol Spence he would last, but it would not surprise me if Crawford can find the opening to give Errol Spence or Sean Porter that that uncomfortable feeling. And I do believe like Terence Crawford hasn't really been tested to that extent to make himself think and say, hey, you know what? Some of these guys are really that good, and I really need to start using my defense as my offense, which I do like that out of him, because Crawford, he has he has a really, really good jab, but he could flick it, and he could also pivot his movement to use his offensive ability for him to win the fight. See, now what I don't like out of Crawford is that when he tries to lean he likes to lean very straightforward after you to make himself more predictable with his aggressive ability, which, I mean, Crawford, he doesn't always do that all the time. Every fight that he fights is completely different, so you don't even know if a Crawford's going to come in as a southpaw, and he could switch it up, within the orthodox stance to make you feel, uncomfortable, and then he could switch right back to southpaw and literally just dominate you. And I feel like Crawford, or just from my observation, Crawford fights better as a southpaw. But here's the issue. If this fight were to get made between him and Errol Spence, how do you deal with a guy that's a southpaw just like you, and he can actually outread you and just know where you are going? And I just think with Spence, he has that cradled, offense and just mastermind defense where he doesn't need to throw that much. Spence can literally just work off of straight jabs and fighting off of the back foot, which, you know, I've seen Spence do that, but Spence doesn't really need to do that. He could just literally go a little bit of Mexican style and then, you know, try to switch it up with that Philly jab and then just end it with a more aggressive, walking you down Floyd Mayweather type of, you know, fighting style. And I think that's really where Spence, you know, where Spence is. He has a very, like, as far as comparing other legendary boxers, this may seem a little bit corny if I say it like this, but he has a Marvin Hagler mixed with a Sugar Ray Robinson ability. And I think what makes him special is that Spence, he's just too good at picking you and wearing you down. And that's what Spence really likes to do. He likes to wear his opponents down. Does that mean Crawford is going to let Spence do that? No. Crawford is going to make Spence think. And I think that when we see Crawford make people think, it actually gets those fighters uncomfortable. And Crawford, he can easily beat you just by outpacing you, just by making you feel like you're not in the fight, but he has to make it feel uncomfortable. And when he's comfortable and you're uncomfortable, it gives Crawford the ultimate ability to come in, take his opportunities, and then boom, he can easily go for that knockout. And I mean, I guess that the Aegis Kavaliauskas fight pretty much proved that when Crawford fights at a southpaw, he's so deadly. You know, I'm a southpaw, and I would never try to rush right in to a jab or try to rush in with a jab to try to KO my opponent. I would try to set that up to make sure that I'm going to get a good knockout. But just seeing Crawford come in with pure speed and also good timing and accuracy, you know, with that jab, that just pretty much shows that Crawford, he's just that good. But here's my second point of why this fight would just not happen. The promoters. You know, I don't know if I've said this, but I think promoters really do need to get out of boxing. These promoters are ruining big fights. If you just take a look at it with PBC and Al Heyman trying to even, which I'm pretty sure they're trying to make this fight between Crawford and Spence, but Bob Arum is obviously screwing everything up. He doesn't want to make this fight happen if Crawford is demanding more money through Top Rank, which I'm pretty sure maybe this is why Crawford tried dropping that 60-40 BS, but I would put the blame on the promoters. The promoters are obviously the ones behind it, because Crawford would not be saying this unless he's not getting paid the right amount of money for what Top Rank promised to him. You know, there's plenty of fights, you know, within Crawford's career where he should have gotten paid way more money, but he had to pay some form of a cut to his opponent for him to get paid, which I'm not too sure if that's a thing in boxing, where your opponent needs more money to fight. So, you know, they try to grandstand you, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, if that's the correct term in boxing. But Crawford has been in that situation where he doesn't get that much money for, you know, any of his big marquee fights, which I would say that had to just been the I guess the undisputed Julius Ndogo and Amir Khan fight. I mean, obviously when he tried unifying titles to go for undisputed with Ndongo, that obviously took a huge slash in his pay, because it's like all these damn sanctioning fees that shouldn't even exist in boxing are destroying fighters. And you know, I'm heavily against, you know, the state interfering with the market in boxing. So all these licensing fees and all these crazy, you know, state regulation just to be approved as a fighter, you know, that needs to go. And the trainers being paid, which I'm all for trainers being paid, but trainers should definitely be. I don't even know how to say it. If anything, I did present the idea to other people that fight leagues should be a thing in boxing, so that way trainers can just have like a full-time job getting, the type of how should I say, revenue that they actually deserve with training their fighter. But if anything, if they just want to get a, well, I wouldn't even just say trainer. See, that's a huge philosophical discussion of how that market would play, but I'm pretty sure there would be a competitive market to offer trainers the right amount of income, and they wouldn't have to complain so much about how much they did get paid, of having a percentage of the fighter's purse coming to them. Like, whenever a fight should be made, there should be a contract for the trainers to say, hey, this is taking promoters out of the picture. If you had like fight networks or fight leagues taking over for boxing, like DAZN and all these fight networks that could pop up, they could say, hey, we'll pay out your fighter and we'll pay out your trainer, so that way you two have your own incomes. And then if the fighter wants to be generous to take out, I think at least, I think it's up to 2 to 3% of the purse. Okay, fine. That should be a voluntary, consensual trade between the fighter and the trainer, or either let the rest of the team. Then everyone walks out happy. I guess that the other part, or the other problem, is having all the sponsorships in boxing. There needs to be a crap load of sponsorships supporting the sport, so that way people can get paid more money and then be guaranteed, bigger opportunities down the line for bigger fights, bigger pay, and much more influence on saying more truthful information to help the sport grow and bring out better competitive results for the sport to improve. But for my second point, it's obviously the promoters. Terence Crawford and Errol Spence do want to fight each other, but the issue is just that these promoters are in the way. Bob Arum has stated that Terence Crawford, can get this fight with Errol Spence, but it's obviously where the fight's going to be and how the fight's going to be structured. But if Bob Arum is going to be complaining over the fact that Crawford can't get this fight because he obviously wants this Manny Pacquiao fight that he's never going to get, and then Bob Arum obviously ruins the opportunities for him to grow, which, it just doesn't surprise me, because Bob Arum is just that type of guy to not really care about what the fighter wants, and that's really the issue with promoters. Don't get it twisted. I know some of you are gonna say, well, Don King used to set up good fights, and that's obviously true, but he wasn't trying to hold off big fights away. He made sure that you got paid and everything was straight. But here's the issue. Don King can set up all the big fights he wants, but if Don King doesn't pay his fighters correctly, and the fighters aren't gonna get the proper cut out of that pie, then yeah, that's why I do say get promoters out of boxing. Because if you have it through a fight network, let's just say if Errol Spence and Terence Crawford were to fight on a fight network, let's just say Triller, I'm just using that. Triller can set up all that money while their subscribers are giving them that money, and then you could set it as a pay-per-view event, and then on top of that, that will be another crowdfunding project to go to both teams to give them that fight, because one, the fans are already paying for the service, and two, the money that's accumulated on both ends will be far greater than having a promoter have their money in their pockets, and then having to go through all this crazy nitty-gritty business with how to properly distribute the money on one single fight card, when clearly it should be on a fight network, because that's how fighters will get their biggest, paydays, is to be on TV more often than having a promoter that they have to rely on getting them big fights. And I understand that for some boxers that are probably out there probably listening to me or to other YouTube channels, but just answer this question for me. Would you rather fight on a fight network that actually promises you an actual pay that you consensually agree to, or would you trust a promoter in which he or she's not guaranteed to give you that money, but they will try to somewhat work in your best interest to get you a fight that may or may not come through for obviously bigger payday, right? And that's basically the issue. It's obviously a business aspect in the sport of boxing that destroys the sport, and that's why people get so frustrated with wanting to get big fights. And sadly, it's just never like that. And I'm not trying to be crude. It's literally the truth for boxing. I understand what some of these fighters are probably complaining about. Granted, I've never been a pro before, but I have spoken to a couple pros, and they tell me, yeah, it's a very tough business. So much politics in the game that it's pretty unnecessary. Boxing should be like the number one sport in the world, if you really think about it. These fighters should be making a crap load of money, and every fight should be like a Super Bowl weekend of seeing multiple fights go on, having fight leagues, having Super 6 tournaments, having just basically everything you could see in boxing that would grow the sport, and people would just enjoy more bigger fights. And I think that can happen, but the issue is obviously the promotions, because if you're let's just say some fighter out of Kentucky, and let's just say Kentucky's not really known for boxing, how do you get your name out there? How do you make sure that you actually have a guaranteed spot in the sport where you can actually grow quicker and grow your name faster? It's obviously through the promoter, because if you fight on a fight network, you would have way more attention because you're now on TV regularly, and you would have to prove yourself in order to be worthy on that network. Because if you really think about it, that's really how casuals really get to boxing. It's mainly through TV. It's not through the promotions. People don't really look at those promotions well. And I mean, I understand advertising is a big thing in boxing. Obviously that can be done the same way for fight networks, because that's really what they're gonna have to do anyway to set up the fight. Let's just say Triller was to have another Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. fight with no promoter in the way, or promoters in the way, they would still make a crap load of money. You want to know why? Because Triller, they're the ones promoting the fight through its network. So that means it's going to be a lot more interesting to see the fight through their app or whatever software that they use, and it's not going to go through some promoter that's going to make up whatever bullshit excuses to say, oh, well, we can't set this fight up because there's something with these promoters that obviously don't want this fight to happen. And that's what pisses off a lot of fans in the sport of boxing. I know for you hardcore boxing fans, you just want to see your guy fight, or your male or female fighter fight, but it's if you really want that person to be in the ring with that other person, it should just be straightforward and simple. I understand, it's business before you get into the ring with anyone. Nobody don't want to be, lowballed. I get that. But I'm saying in a pure market, or a pure free market where people were to actually get paid for their hard work and labor at a higher value of supply and demand, I truly believe a fight network and fight leagues would definitely help out the sport of boxing to make it similar, just like the NBA in a way, or UFC. And maybe that might be a good idea. But here's my thing. Let's try it out and let's see how that works. I think for Errol Spence and Terence Crawford, that would be a very good fit. But the issue is just that you have to have, that organization together. And I do believe it's there, but it obviously just needs a little bit of work to get there. And I don't think it's really that hard to do. But that's really my second point of this issue. The third point is just, I don't know. What would let the third point be? The third point would probably be, Errol Spence losing interest and Terence Crawford losing interest, in the boxing fight itself. Both fighters are going to lose interest quicker if the fight isn't made sooner. So basically, my point is that Terence Crawford or Errol Spence, either way, are going to naturally lose interest in the fight, because if Terence Crawford says, I do not need Errol Spence needs me, then that just makes Errol Spence think twice about the fight, to say, well, guess what? Keep my name out of your fucking mouth. Excuse my French, sorry. And, let me go about, my own way. And that's really how Errol Spence is feeling about this fight, because he knows that Terence Crawford needs him more than he needs Crawford. And Errol Spence can literally move up to 154 and say, well, you know what, screw it. He can take undisputed status after I get it, and then, there's really nothing I don't need to do with him, because I don't really, want to have a fight with him anyway, because he's not going to give him, I guess, that same respect that he was trying to gain from Keith Thurman when he was, two-time, world champion, or, right? Yeah, two-time world champion. But either way, it's just Errol Spence does not need Crawford. Errol Spence has everything in the bag. He has the money. He has the right trainers around him. He has a great team. But the issue is just what would Crawford bring to the table? And I think with Crawford, he's going to have to beg to Errol Spence to say, please give me this fight, or else I will find a different route to tarnish your career. And Errol's just going to look at him, sending all those laughing emojis over Instagram or whatever. I'm just making stuff up, but it's just you realize Errol Spence would just be laughing at Terence Crawford, because Spence has really worked hard for his career, and I used to doubt him at one point because I wasn't thinking Errol Spence was really the truth that he calls himself to be, but no, he really is. Him and Danny Garcia, all the really good welterweights that were there before Crawford, they're really good fighters, and I really do appreciate what Errol Spence brings to the table. And I'm not trying to how should I say, dick ride Errol Spence. He's not the fighter that I'm going to protect all the time. If Errol Spence does something stupid, I'm going to call it out. But I just know Errol Spence, he's not dumb for what he does. He's very intelligent. And yes, he made some mistakes in the past that almost cost him his life with the car accident. But for him to come back from that accident, give Danny Garcia a very good fight, and actually create some bigger noise to the welterweight division, I think Errol Spence knows that his career has really made such a huge impact, and people know what he's about now. And he's now a much bigger threat for what he wants to do with his career, and nobody's not going to ever want to try to mess with him, because he's now going to get a lot better in his upcoming fights, and his career is basically almost solidified if he gets this last belt from Manny Pacquiao, and he will become undisputed at 147. Minus led the WBO belt, as other organizations like the WBC, WBA, and other major title belt industries say that the WBO isn't really yeah, like, I mean, like, it's not considered a world title, but it's technically is. So, but I guess to those industries or those businesses, they say that you don't need the WBO belt in order to become undisputed. But I'll just take their word for granted. I do believe it should be required in a sense, but I guess just to make it fair, but the three major title belts is mainly the WBC, IBF, and WBA. But either way, I think Spence doesn't really care about that. He really doesn't need to, he really doesn't need to focus on Crawford. He can literally go his own way, and Crawford can do the exact same. I mean, by the time when Errol Spence leaves, Crawford will probably take over 147 if he can. I don't know if he's going to want to fight Jaron Ennis or Virgil Ortiz. But it's just like, should Crawford just stay at 147 until it's all said and done? Or should he just get away and just retire? Because, he is naturally losing interest in the sport of boxing. He obviously shows it that he doesn't want to push himself further to his actual limits. And, yeah. I don't think Crawford really is dedicated to his own sport that he claims to love so much. And I just don't think Crawford, if he's really there, then why why are you still boxing? That's really like my honest question for Crawford's career choices. But I would hope that these two would fight. If this fight really does happen, Errol Spence is gonna really have some big issues with Crawford. Not just for the fact that Crawford is much stronger than him. It's just that the fact of where Errol Spence's physicality is due to his recent fight with Danny Garcia. There was reports that Errol's gonna probably reunite with Blu-ray Fitness. I guess that's at Fitness for the strength and conditioning that Errol got into, with the trainer for him to get ready for bigger fights. So I think once Errol gets back into that type of workout camp, he's going to be such a huge problem. And that's really why people are so, I guess, afraid of Errol Spence in a way, where they just don't want to talk about him, because he is basically either number 2 or number 1 on the pound for pound ranking list, where he's just that good of a fighter. And I pretty much label Errol Spence as the Paul Pierce of boxing, because he is Paul Pierce. I'm only saying that in the sense of he is literally literally the truth. No matter how old he is, he will still be the best fighter on the planet, and he has so much skill and versatility where he doesn't need to really think about his boxing ability. It just naturally comes. But either way, I really want to see this fight between him and Terence Crawford. Let me know what you guys think, and that is it. I'm signing out. Thank you guys very much for watching this video. Thank you, and goodbye.